I'd never bought myself anything that cost more than a couple $100. Not once. Every dime I made went somewhere else. Repairs, bills, birthdays, emergencies that weren't mine, but somehow became my problem. But turning 32 hit me like a quiet punch in the gut. I wasn't getting younger. The years were stacking up and I had nothing to show for it. That's when the idea started. Not a whim, no, something deeper. I wanted a laptop, a real one, not a hand-me-down or some budget thing from a clearance sale. A $3,000 machine that could actually run the projects I dreamed of. Let me freelance on the side, maybe even build something of my own one day. I knew people would say it was ridiculous, that I was wasting money. But this wasn't about the specs, it was about choosing something for me finally. My whole life, I'd been the guy who made do, the one who waited. I remember being 15, watching my siblings unwrap gifts, new phones, tablets, trendy clothes. Me? I got what they grew out of. I wasn't mad. I got used to it. But the message was always clear. I was the backup plan, the afterthought. This laptop, it was going to be my first win. So I started saving. Quietly. I skipped takeout, walked to work even when it rained, fixed my sneakers with duct tape. Every dollar I didn't spend was a small yes to the man I wanted to become. At home, they didn't get it. My sister laughed when I said no to pizza night. You saving up for a spaceship or something? She teased. Mom said I was being paranoid. Dad grumbled that I was turning into a miser. At one family dinner, my sister held up her glass and joked, "To my brother, who's going to marry his laptop when it arrives." Everyone laughed. I smiled, but I didn't join in. Inside, something stung. They didn't know what it felt like to be invisible in your own home, to want something and have no one take it seriously. Last month, that same sister asked me for $100. I gave it. She never brought it up again until she mocked me a week later for counting coupons. They didn't see the sacrifices. The nights I went to bed hungry, the weekends I stayed in skipping trips and birthdays and barbecues. I was betting everything on this machine, not because I worshipped tech, but because it meant freedom. Then came the day, a Thursday. FedEx truck pulled up around 10:30 a.m. I watched from the window like a kid waiting for Santa. My hands were trembling when I signed for it. I sat on the floor and opened it slowly, carefully, like it was sacred. Plastic wrapping crinkling. The new smell, the smooth, cold surface. It wasn't just a laptop, it was a doorway. Setting it up felt like a ritual. Name, password, desktop wallpaper, I was grinning like a fool. For the first time in years, I felt like I'd done something just for me. But even as I worked through the settings, a small knot tightened in my gut. Would they laugh? Would they care? I didn't have to wait long. My sister came in unannounced, no knock, just a breezy, "Hey, what's up?" She spotted the laptop immediately, walked over, poked it like it was some museum piece. "This is what you've been starving yourself for." I didn't answer. She scoffed. $3,000 for this? You could have gotten a decent one for half that. God, you're so dramatic. I stared at her, then back at the screen. I could feel her trying to suck the joy out of the moment, but I wouldn't let her. This was mine. She couldn't ruin that. That night, I powered it up and worked on a small freelance gig. An old client needed a database cleaned. I stayed up late, fingers flying. When I submitted the finished job, I leaned back and exhaled. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The next evening, I overheard them talking in the kitchen. My name, followed by chuckles. "He thinks he's Steve Jobs now," someone said, probably my brother-in-law. Then my sister chimed in, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Next thing you know, he'll want us to bow before his robot girlfriend." They laughed again. But this time, it didn't sound like teasing. It sounded like contempt. Like I'd broken some unspoken rule by trying. Like they needed me to stay small, stay predictable. That's when it hit me. They liked me better when I was struggling, when I needed them, when I didn't believe I could be anything else. I closed the laptop and sat in silence. Maybe they were right. Maybe I didn't belong here anymore. Saturday came with that sticky kind of heat that settles into your clothes before noon. My sister's backyard was buzzing, grills smoking, kids screeching as they cannonballed into the pool. Someone's playlist blasting pop songs from a Bluetooth speaker that kept cutting out. She threw the party for her son. He'd won some local baseball thing. Championship, I think. I don't remember. What I do remember is walking in with my laptop bag slung over my shoulder like it was armor. I didn't want to be there. Not really. But I showed up because sometimes that's the only way they remember you exist. You become the empty chair if you don't. And I was tired of being the one they forgot to count. Everyone was already there. My brother-in-law had his Bud Light. My mom was carrying paper plates stacked like pancakes. And my sister, center stage as always, was glowing in her performative pride. They clapped when her boy walked out with his trophy. I clapped too, polite, measured, but invisible, still. I didn't plan to stay long. I figured I'd show my face, grab a soda, then head out to a coffee shop to get some freelance work done. That's why I brought the laptop. But I should have known. Should have read the temperature in the air. It wasn't just heat, it was something else, something waiting. My sister noticed the bag and grinned like she'd found a chew toy. "Hey everyone," she called out, waving her drink like a magic wand. "Guess what our little genius brought to the barbecue?" I froze. "This boy thinks he's launching NASA from our garage," she cackled. They laughed, hard. One of her friends let out a wheeze. Even my mom chuckled, awkward, unsure, but still. I opened my mouth, closed it again. Then came the next blow. Her son, 11, maybe 12, snatched the bag before I could stop him. "Let's fire this baby up," he yelled, pulling out the laptop and holding it up like a game show prize. 10, 9, 8. "Be careful with that," I said, calm, even. "Oh, relax," my sister chimed. "It's just a laptop, not the second coming." They were all watching now, expecting me to break. I didn't. I just walked toward him slowly, hand out. But he darted back, laughing. "Launch sequence initiated." He passed it to one of his cousins, then another. The thing was being tossed around like a frisbee, my stomach twisting with each pass. You learn to bite your tongue so much it bleeds, I thought. I didn't yell, didn't chase, didn't flinch. I just stood there, waiting for it to end. Then my sister, smirking, raised her eyebrow at her son. "Want to see what a $3,000 cannonball looks like?" The boy's eyes lit up. He didn't hesitate, didn't ask. He just ran to the edge of the pool and, before I could take one step, hurled the laptop into the deep end. The crowd erupted. Cheers, laughter, a few claps like it was some kind of joke skit. Then they turned. To me, and I didn't move. No yelling, no running. I just watched. The water rippled. Bubbles rose. The screen flickered once, then disappeared beneath the surface. My heartbeat didn't race. My palms didn't sweat. I stood there stone, and slowly, their smiles started to fade. One by one, the laughter died down. Realization spread like cold wind through a crowd. They saw it in my face. I wasn't hurt. I was done. They say silence speaks louder. Mine shouted. A niece came over with a towel. I didn't take it. I just turned and walked out. Each step to the car felt like 100 miles. I didn't look back. But in my head, the moment kept replaying. Not the splash, not the ruined tech, but the faces. How entertained they were. How comfortable they were. It wasn't a prank. It was a message, a test to see how far they could push me and still expect me to stay. This wasn't the first time, just the most expensive. I remembered birthdays forgotten, favors taken for granted, jokes that cut deeper than they were meant to. The cruelty wasn't new, only the price tag changed. I stood in the parking lot, keys in hand, sun setting behind me, casting long shadows across the hood of my car. And I whispered to no one in particular. This was the last time I let them laugh while I bled. Sunday morning came gray and heavy, the kind of light that makes everything in the kitchen look older than it is. My bag sat next to the trash bin, still damp. Water had streaked down the leather and pooled on the linoleum. The laptop inside was silent, a dead weight. I hadn't opened it since yesterday. I stood at the counter with a mug of coffee cooling in my hands. I hadn't checked my phone. No messages, no family group chat, no half-hearted apologies waiting for me. Just quiet, not peace, something else. A hush like a room after a slammed door. My arms felt heavy, but my mind wasn't foggy. There was a strange clarity in me, like a string had finally snapped. But instead of scattering, it held everything together. I tried to picture the splash. Instead, I saw faces. My sister's grin, my mother's half laugh, the boys' thrill. I heard their voices, but not the words. It all blurred into one long sound of permission. Permission to humiliate me and call it fun. I took a sip of coffee. It tasted burned, but I swallowed anyway. There's a quiet that comes after betrayal, I thought. Not peace, just the silence of something inside dying. I set the mug down and walked to the bathroom. In the mirror, my own eyes looked older, not sad, not angry, just awake. By noon, memories began to creep in. Not yesterday, years. I thought of the family reunion 5 years ago. Everyone drove up to the cabin except me. My sister swore she'd sent the invite. Later, she said it must have gone to spam. They posted pictures on Facebook, all smiles. I commented a heart, nobody replied. Then Christmas 2 years back. Mom said she'd split the gift budget evenly. Her son got a new bike. My niece got a tablet. My boy got socks. They told me not to make it a thing. One Thanksgiving, I'd serve food while they laughed about my dull life like I wasn't standing there. "You're so responsible," my sister said with a smirk, carving the turkey. "Somebody's got to be the boring one." It was always like that. Little things, small cuts, and me explaining them away. She didn't mean it. It's not worth a fight. They're family. I looked at my reflection again, wiped the fog from the glass with my palm. "Maybe they didn't change," I whispered. "Maybe I just stopped justifying it." Monday came with fluorescent lights and the low hum of the office. My coworkers greeted me. "Hey man, good job on that rollout last week." "Looking sharp today." I smiled back, polite but detached. The contrast was jarring. Here, I was respected. There, I was tolerated. My boss stopped by my desk. "Great work on that project. You're up for the big presentation Wednesday. Don't let me down." He clapped me on the shoulder and walked off. I opened my bag to pull out my notes. The smell hit me first, chlorine, plastic, and ruin. The laptop was gone. With it, my slides, my research, my late nights. It wasn't just an object they destroyed. It was a part of my future. I sat back in my chair, staring at the blank spot on my desk where the machine should have been. The hum of the office faded, and for a moment it felt like Saturday again, the ripple of water, the hush after laughter. At lunch, I walked to the park. The air was crisp, a light wind tossing leaves across the path. I pulled a small notebook from my coat pocket. Not a list of grievances, a list of boundaries. One by one, I wrote names. Next to each, a line of what I would no longer tolerate. I started researching laptops on my phone, budgeting plans, replacement policies. It wasn't about the device anymore. It was about control. For a moment, I thought of calling my sister, asking her to pay for it. But the idea dissolved before it formed. Seeking fairness from the unfair is madness. I closed the notebook and leaned back on the bench, watching a pair of kids kick a soccer ball. "If they can laugh while I lose," I murmured, "I can learn while I bleed." Sunday morning, the kitchen felt like a waiting room after bad news. The wall clock ticked louder than it should. My laptop bag sat on the floor, sagging and darkened from yesterday's water. I hadn't unzipped it. I didn't need to see the ruin inside to know it was gone. I stood at the counter, pouring coffee slowly, letting the steam rise like a signal I wasn't ready to send. My phone buzzed. Group chat messages stacked up. "Hey, about yesterday. It was just a joke. Lighten up." I turned it face down without reading more. No explanations, no excuses, just absence. My eyes drifted back to the bag. They didn't destroy the laptop, I thought. They destroyed what I built to prove I mattered. The words felt like someone else's voice in my head. I took a sip of coffee. It tasted burnt, but steady. For a while, I just stood there breathing. I didn't cry. I didn't even tremble. The silence wasn't peace. It was the sound of something inside me dying. But in that space, something else stirred. A hard edge of clarity I hadn't felt before. That edge cut through memories I'd kept quiet about. A Christmas years ago, my sister forgot to tell me the location had changed. I drove to an empty house and waited on the porch, wondering if my watch was wrong. Later, she laughed and said, "I swear I texted you." Another time, my parents thought I couldn't hear them. "He's always the helper, never the star," my mother said while wrapping gifts. My father chuckled. I stood in the hallway holding bags of groceries. There was that family trip to the lake. I'd paid the hotel deposit because my sister left her card at home. Later, when she posted pictures, I was cropped out of every single one. I scrolled through them in silence, noticing the empty space where I should have been. It was always polite dismissals, quiet disrespect, little cuts adding up until you don't notice you're bleeding. Cruelty isn't always loud, I told myself. Sometimes it whispers long enough for you to believe it. I realized I'd been trained to feel grateful for being ignored. By Monday afternoon, I was back at work. The building smelled like coffee and printer ink, cool-toned and minimalistic. My assistant smiled. "That report you did last week? The client's thrilled." An email pinged with more praise. Here, I was needed. At home, I was tolerated. The contrast made me lightheaded. I reached into my bag for my notes. The smell of chlorine punched me in the chest. The notes were gone, dissolved with the laptop. A coworker passed by. "You okay? You look tired." "Just didn't sleep well," I said automatically. Inside, I wasn't tired, I was furious. Work didn't define me, but it reminded me of what I was capable of, and they'd tried to take that from me. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table again. The bag was still there, sagging like a soaked animal. I opened a fresh notebook and wrote on the first page, "Things I will no longer accept." I wrote my sister's name. Underneath, sarcasm masked as concern, financial sabotage. On the next page, I listed tools I'd need to replace, sketched a timeline for saving. I considered buying a used laptop. I even opened the family chat, my thumb hovering over my sister's name. But I stopped. Seeking fairness from the unfair is madness. I closed the notebook and went to the bathroom mirror. My face looked older, but steadier. "They raised me to be quiet," I said softly. "I've unlearned obedience." The call came on a Wednesday night. My mother's voice was warm, but it had that familiar undercurrent, sweet, guilt-laced manipulation. "We're just having a little dinner tomorrow. Nothing fancy. Your sister's bringing dessert. We miss your help around here." Miss my help, not me. Just my hands, my presence, to fill the empty spots in their carefully maintained image. I stared at the phone long after the call ended. I could have said no. I should have. But I didn't. I wasn't going for reconciliation. I was going to draw a line. This time I'd be showing up on my terms. I chose my outfit carefully. Simple, neutral, strong, the kind of thing that didn't beg for compliments or hide discomfort. On the drive over, I played no music, just silence, preparing. Their house looked the same, like a postcard of suburban peace. But stepping in was like walking onto a stage where everyone already had their lines memorized. My sister greeted me first, her arms flung out in a showy hug that barely touched my shoulders. Look who finally made time for family. My parents smiled too widely. My mother clutched my arm just a little too long. "You've lost weight. Are you eating enough?" The table was already set. Roles fell into place with mechanical ease. My sister dominated the conversation, effortlessly absorbing the room's attention. My parents nodded and laughed at every quip. I observed, quiet but watchful, letting the rhythms play out. Dinner started with harmless topics. Then came the jabs, veiled in humor. My niece, fidgeting, said loudly, "I wish I had my tablet tonight." "Oh," my sister chuckled, tilting her head in mock sadness. "Well, not everyone's meant to keep nice things. Right, Uncle?" The room laughed lightly. Forks clinked against plates. I didn't smile. I didn't respond. I let the silence spread. It sat heavy, unnatural. My father cleared his throat. My mother reached for the bread. I leaned back in my chair and looked directly at my sister. "Do you think cruelty makes you clever?" She blinked, smirked. "It's just a joke. Don't take things so seriously." I didn't look away. "I came here tonight to say something, not to swallow another insult." The air in the room shifted. My father looked down at his plate. My mother froze mid-pour with the tea. My sister's smile faltered, just slightly. "You've spent years dressing up digs as banter," I said calmly. "At birthdays, at holidays, even when I was footing bills you didn't acknowledge. Then last week, you destroyed something that wasn't yours and called it fun." She rolled her eyes. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said, "I'm being deliberate. This is your final line. Next time, you won't see me quietly walk away. You'll see me rise." My sister scoffed, but her laugh cracked on the edge. I could see it. She knew I meant it. My parents didn't interrupt, not this time. They sat still, maybe unsure what version of me was sitting at their table now. I picked up my glass, took a sip of water. Silence was once my shield. Now, it's your warning. Dinner continued, but something had shifted. The atmosphere was unsettled. I didn't wait for dessert. I stood, nodded politely, and walked out without hugging anyone. The drive home was still. I didn't blast music or let rage boil over. Instead, I felt something deeper, certainty. Something had cracked open, and there was no patching it back. When I got home, I opened my notebook again, not for venting, for strategy. I wrote, "They can't hurt what they no longer control." I flipped to a fresh page and began drafting a donation form. My niece's broken tablet, still salvageable, would go to a local tech workshop. They helped girls from underserved neighborhoods learn coding and repair skills. Let her tablet actually do some good in this world. That night, I ended my journal entry with one quiet sentence. The ones who called me weak never noticed I was just patient. That evening, I sat in my study under the dim glow of the desk lamp, the notebook open beside me. I read over my list, things I will no longer accept, each line like a vow. The words I wrote earlier in the week felt small now. Sarcasm, masked as concern, financial sabotage, unspoken contempt. Tonight I needed more than vows. I needed action. I opened my laptop, browsed legal forums, sent messages to a paralegal friend I trusted. I asked about certified letters, demands, property claims. As I worked, a memory stabbed me. My sister had asked to borrow $500 and never paid it back. When I asked her about it later, she acted as though she'd never heard the number. That pattern, take without accountability, had been drilled into every interaction we'd had. Pain in my chest turned into resolve. I pulled up a blank document and began drafting a formal notice addressed to my sister, my parents, my brother-in-law. I laid out claims, unfair damage, expectations, restitution. I stated what I demanded. Apology, compensation, transfer of ownership, if needed. I reread every sentence. No bluster, no wild threats, clear language. Midnight crept in. I stared at the draft. I could wait and send it tomorrow. Or I could mail it tonight, the symbolic act of turning the tide. I hovered over the print button before closing the laptop. I went to sleep with my heart pounding as though I were waiting for a verdict. By morning, I felt strangely calm. I drove to the local courthouse, then to the mailing center downtown. The sun was low, light just tipping the sidewalks gold. At the postal desk, I placed my stack of certified envelopes before the clerk. I watched her stamp them, each seal pressing closure. Envelopes addressed in my handwriting, crisp and plain. My pulse hammered. My lungs filled and emptied. Fear and exhilaration warred inside me. This was new terrain, stepping beyond silence. The clerk handed them back. "Certified," she said. I nodded. I left feeling heavy and electric at the same time, imagining my family reading what I had laid before them. By afternoon, I had my phone back. The family group chat exploded. Messages came flooding in. "Sister, you think you can scare me with paper?" "Mother, is this really necessary? You're overreacting." "Father, this escalation is ridiculous." I responded little. I held firm. No apologies. No explanations beyond what I wrote. I refused to be gaslit again. My chest burned, but I reminded myself no more bending. Eventually, I turned off the phone just long enough to breathe. Night closed in. The neighborhood felt different. I sensed whispering behind blinds, peripheral glances. My sister's husband made offhand remarks when he saw me at the mailbox. "She's lost it," he muttered to someone. I caught the edge of the comment as I returned inside. I noticed neighbors looking from upper windows. My phone lit up with messages, some supportive, others venomous, anonymous threats, snide jabs about my emotional instability, but also a few from strangers I barely knew. "I believe you. You did the right thing." I stood by the front door, locking each bolt, watching the hallway darken, heart pounding loud in the quiet. They'd opened a war, and I hadn't started it. Sunday afternoon. The heat pressed down on everything: sky, lawn, people. I pulled up to the family house knowing full well this wasn't a meal, it was a stage. I walked through the side gate into the backyard where folding chairs circled a plastic table already set with too many salads no one touched. A few cousins looked up from their phones. Some smiled politely. Others didn't bother. My mother waved a little, pretending this wasn't orchestrated. Then Odessa turned. Her voice came slick and sweet, too loud for the space. "Oh, look who decided to show up. Hope you brought receipts for that $3,000 meltdown." Laughter rippled. Awkward, unsure. I felt it in my chest, not anger, not fear, something else. Precision. I stepped forward and nodded. "Nice to see you too, Odessa." She kept going, her voice wrapping sarcasm in silk. "I mean, I still can't believe a grown woman would sue over a laptop. But hey, drama sells, right?" I noticed how our aunt froze mid-sip, how Mom looked away, how Dad examined a potted plant like it held secrets. I stood there, feeling the muscles in my legs tighten like coiled wire. I didn't raise my voice, didn't interrupt. I waited for her to finish performing, then I said, "You know what I remember? You once borrowed money from me to cover rent and promised to pay it back by Christmas. That was 5 Christmases ago?" She laughed, sharp and forced. "We're really going there?" I came here to say it out loud. I'm done pretending this is sibling tension. You've crossed lines for years and everyone's just watched. Not anymore. The air went thin. Nobody moved. A fly buzzed near the fruit bowl. I've played quiet. I've played nice. But you've played dirty and called it just family. So here it is. The games are over. This was your final warning. Her face twitched. Her voice came back low, almost shaking. "You're being dramatic." "No, I'm being precise." I didn't wait for another fake smile. I turned and walked straight out, past the lattice archway, past the sagging fence, down the gravel drive. That evening I sat on the couch, phone in my hand, light from the screen painting my face. I hit record. My voice was calm. I said what needed saying about the laptop, the history, how I saved every month to buy it, what it meant to me, what its destruction really stood for. Halfway through, Brielle sat beside me. She looked straight into the lens and said, "I watched it burn. I cried. And I still believe in my mother's strength." We posted it. No edits. No polish. Just truth. The upload bar crawled. My heart thundered. I felt like I was standing on the edge of something deep. "If truth can scare me," I said at the end of the video, "then lies deserve the spotlight." Then silence. No comments at first, no reactions, just a spinning circle. And then, like a dam cracked, messages flooded in. Dozens, hundreds, thousands. Some hateful, she's lying, drama queen. This family stuff should stay private. Some supportive, you're brave. This happened to me too. Don't back down. I didn't read them all. I couldn't. But Brielle did. She sat beside me, reading her favorites out loud, smiling like she was 10 again, and the world was still gentle. Then came the message that changed everything. A local journalist. Would you be willing to speak on record? I stared at it. I typed yes, cautiously. That night I gathered every receipt. Screenshots, contracts, emails, a paper trail so long it hurt. By morning, the Homeowners Association sent a letter, online harassment complaints. Right after, Odessa's lawyer emailed a cease and desist. Remove the video or face a defamation lawsuit. I didn't panic. I forwarded it to my paralegal friend. She replied, "They've got no case. Hold steady." I did more than that. I posted one sentence. You can't silence what courage has already spoken. I checked the video again. It had over 230,000 views. They thought they broke me, I said aloud, barely above a whisper. They only opened the gates. Monday morning came heavy with a gray sky and air too still for comfort. I parked across from the courthouse, the weight of my briefcase far lighter than the weight in my chest. Before I'd even made it to the steps, I saw them. News vans, local channels, freelancers, microphones hanging from shoulders like weapons waiting to be drawn. My last name was now public currency. Journalists hovered outside like flies on fruit. One asked if I had a statement. I didn't answer. Another called out Odessa's name as she exited her car, oversized sunglasses and forced smile in place. She waved, like this was a red carpet instead of a courtroom. She caught sight of me, smirked. Really? Dragging this into the press? I didn't respond. I just walked. But I heard murmurs. People standing around whispering, glancing from her to me. One woman I recognized from our old neighborhood met my eyes. She didn't smile, but she nodded. For once, the judgment in their faces wasn't only pointed at me. The tide was shifting, and I could feel it under my feet. Inside, it was cold, formal. My paralegal friend sat beside me, firm as granite. Across the aisle, Odessa and her lawyer whispered with fake confidence. The judge called us forward. I opened my folder slowly. Page after page. Receipts, loan documents, emails, damage photos. I laid them out like a map of everything they thought I'd never dare show. Odessa's attorney objected. Your Honor, this has been exaggerated, dramatized. My client is deeply concerned about the mental health allegations this individual. I stood, interrupted, respectfully. Judge, I'm not here to perform. I'm here to reclaim. These are facts, not fiction. Laws were broken, boundaries ignored. This is no longer about family. It's about fraud. I read a clause out loud, then another. I cited past rulings, case numbers. My voice never rose, but it didn't waver either. When I finished, the room went still. The judge looked over his glasses. Ms. Hernandez, I find the evidence compelling. I'm granting recovery of the listed property, restitution for damages, and an official warning to the opposing party regarding continued defamation. I didn't cry, but my hands shook under the table. I closed my folder slowly, like sealing up a chapter. I didn't ask for justice. I forced it. Later that afternoon, I pulled into my parents' driveway, the same carport, the same wind chime on the porch that hadn't made a sound in years. But this time, everything felt different. Dinner was already served when I walked in. My father sat stiff. My mother stirred green beans like they might disappear if she kept spinning the spoon. Odessa was there, silent, stone-faced. I took the head of the table without asking, laid down a manila folder gently, the same folder I'd carried into court. I'm giving you one chance, I said. This isn't about spite. It's about accountability, settlement, apology, and from here on out, respect. Odessa said nothing for a while, then she muttered, "You think this makes you the hero?" I leaned forward. "I don't need to be the hero, just the one who stopped pretending." Dad scoffed. Mom's lips thinned, but they didn't argue, not the way they used to, because this time I had weight behind my words, and they knew it. That evening I sat alone on the back patio, the same one where I used to barbecue with Betrayal before everything cracked, the same patio that faced the pool, the graveyard of my laptop. I opened my laptop, different one now, new, paid in full, no stolen parts. The video had hit the local news cycle. Family lawsuit sparks community conversation on inheritance and abuse. My inbox was flooded. People shared their stories, their pain, their gratitude. One message hit me hard. It was from a woman in her 60s. "My brother stole our parents' property after they passed. No one believed me. You gave me hope again." I closed the laptop, stared out at the water. The ripples shimmered under porch light, quiet, steady, peaceful almost. "Now begins the rebuilding," I whispered. Then the doorbell rang. I got up cautious. On the porch sat a small, plain package. No return address. I didn't open it. Not yet. I just held it, heart tight in my chest. Because sometimes victory doesn't close the story. It just clears the field for the next battle. That morning I woke up before the sun. No alarms, no dread, just breath. Full and deep, like I hadn't known in years. The kind that doesn't carry shame or panic, just stillness. I stayed in bed a minute longer, staring at the ceiling fan. It spun slowly, lazily, no urgency. I reached over to my nightstand, opened the folder that held the final court documents. Settlement confirmed, press release approved, compensation outlined, property returned. A copy of the judge's signature sat on top, black ink that might as well have been gold. I texted my lawyer. "Signed and acknowledged, thank you." She replied with a thumbs up and one word, dignity. I let that sink in. In the kitchen, the smell of fresh coffee filled the air. I poured myself a cup, leaned on the counter, and thought about everything I'd crawled through. Not just the court, the silences, the glances, the years of being treated like I should be grateful for crumbs. I thought of Thelma Jean. God rest her soul. If she were still here, she'd be sitting right across from me, nodding slow, hands wrapped around her own chipped coffee mug. And Brielle, my daughter, my anchor. There were people who held the line with me, even when I was on my knees. I hadn't forgotten them. I got dressed slowly, chose a dark blue button-up and slacks, no tie, just clean, strong, unbothered. I stepped outside, the porch light still flickering from the night before, and took in the day. Crisp, quiet, mine. By mid-morning, my phone buzzed again, family group call. I hesitated, picked up. Odessa's voice cut sharp through the speaker. "You need to undo this, all of it. You embarrassed everyone." I didn't flinch. Let her talk. Let the venom drain. "You think this makes you some kind of hero? It's not over. You still have—" I cut in, calm. "I'm not undoing anything. I'm done carrying your shame." Silence. Then our mother's voice, soft, uneasy. "I just wish you had come to us first." "I did," I said. "You just never listened." The call fell quiet again. Then I ended it, because there was nothing left to prove to people who'd decided long ago who I was and refused to change their minds. Later that day, I stood in front of the new workshop, a modest building, but clean and bright, painted fresh. The sign over the door read, "Next Code Foundation." Brielle stood beside me, holding scissors too big for her hands. Community members gathered, neighbors, volunteers, a few kids from the neighborhood. She cut the ribbon with a determined little swipe. Cheers broke out. I stepped forward, cleared my throat. I didn't build this out of anger. I built this because silence never protected anyone. This place, it's for the next ones, the ones who don't have to start from scratch. A woman in the back, someone I hadn't spoken to in over a decade, lifted her chin and nodded. She knew. She remembered. I caught a glimpse. Across the street, Odessa's windows were shut tight, Curtains drawn, no movement. Even shadows retreat when light gets strong enough. That evening, I walked out back. The pool had been cleaned. Lights under the water made it glow like a glass lantern. Not a grave anymore, just water. I stood at the edge, held out a handful of petals, bright ones, the kind Thelma Jean used to float in her bath. I dropped them in, one by one, watched them spin in circles. "You belong here no longer," I said. I let go of what sank. Brielle came up beside me, slipped her hand into mine. "We build from here," she whispered. I nodded, then walked inside, opened a new laptop, sat at the desk. On the screen were open tabs, code files, lesson plans, recorded messages to send out to the first wave of students. The next chapter already taking shape. I hit play, and with that, I began. This is only the beginning of what we deserve.